The Isle of Skye is infamous as a playground for photographers. An island so tiny, yet so packed full of beauty, of drama and of potential. It's a place that can offer the utmost peace and tranquility 1 minute, yet seemingly in an instant, it can change its mood, throwing up conditions so hostile that even the most ardent of landscape photographer might be forced to retire to a warm shelter. I've lived in Scotland for years now, yet I've only just been able to finally visit. But boy was it worth the wait. In today's video, I'll take you on my photography trip around Skye, capturing a series of landscape images just like these. My first full day began in the most magically Scottish way possible. A kilted bagpiper playing the iconic Skye boat song down by the harbour at Elgol. I was getting a boat to explore Loch Coruisk, but even the journey itself was stunning, with bracing sea spray splashing up in my face, blue skies overhead, and great views of the surrounding mountains. I particularly liked this view, but as the boat passed, I was able to line up this tiny house at the foot of the peak with the line of the shadow on the mountain itself. I love the epic size context the house provides here, and I think it really brings this scene alive. Saw a variety of seabirds and even some basking seals on the journey, and while I didn't have a long wildlife lens, I was able to get close enough with my 24-105 to snag a shot. Still on the water, I took this image of a smaller boat moored up with this great lone cabin complete with Scottish flags. The walk around Loch Coruisk was straightforward enough, with nice blue skies hanging over the surrounding peaks and good contrast generally in the scene. I tried using these boulders as interesting foreground subjects, and I like the shots, but I do feel I could have spent a bit more time refining the composition. Further around the walk, however, I came upon a small waterfall, which had much more potential.
I've got my camera set up on my tripod because I'm using a slightly slower shutter speed here. I'm trying to get it to around a second, but I've only got a 10-stop ND with me. And at f5 and at ISO 500, that's about 1.3 seconds. But I don't really want to go at ISO 300. I'm going to do 250, f6.3, and I'm going to need a shutter speed of about 2 seconds for this. I'm feeling super fortunate with the weather. It's beautiful, we've just got glorious skies, plenty of cloud detail. It's a nice warm spring day, but it's not so warm that I'm feeling too hot when I'm hiking. It's an absolute joy.
The next day I headed for an iconic location, the fairy pools. And frankly, it was a disappointment. Fine, it is a beautiful area with lovely little waterfalls that were just beautiful to walk around, but I struggled with the harsh lighting and particularly struggled with the sheer number of people there. It's no surprise that such an Instagram famous place would be busy, but overall it left me feeling rather uninspired, so while I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the area with my own eyes, I didn't get anything out of it from a photography perspective. Later that day, I moved on to another iconic location, Talisker Bay. famous for its sea stacks and for its waterfall that frequently flows upwards due to the strong winds that batter the bay. I certainly caught it on a windy day, with the waterfall in full upward flow, massive spray off the waves, and cold driving rain. Although that didn't stop this one brave soul trying to get some swimming in. The clouds meant I had disappointingly flat light, but I tried to look for foreground interest on the beach, using rocks or pools of water to create more interesting compositions with the sea stack and the surrounding cliffs in the background. The shots are fine, but I'd love to return here in different conditions to see what I can get. The cloud hung around into the next day, but I liked the mood it brought with it. I took a quick detour to these boats before finding what I hoped would be a decent photo spot a short walk from the road. Today it's really grey, it's been hammering down with rain, clouds overhead, and to be honest, I love it. Skye looks incredible with weather like this. I would far prefer it to be grey and moody and a bit miserable than just for it to be empty blue skies, and I think most photographers would agree with things like that. But there's a particular scene that I've come to photograph because there was a cafe where I was sitting before while the rain was coming down, and I saw this sort of bit of a ruin but with a lovely sort of hill behind it that when there was a break in the clouds it lit up really nicely. So I've come down and I'm basically just sort of hanging out trying to wait for that shot, but as I am doing, my camera is getting pretty soaking wet, so I think I'm going to pack away and just hunker down. I've taken a few snaps, but yeah, the rain's really coming down now, so yeah, let's put this away. Let's not take any risks. As I've been hanging around, the clouds have been moving overhead, and as they have been, the light has been kind of shifting on the land, and also that's why the rain keeps coming and going. It got really tough, and now it's cleared up again. So I'm back on this composition, and I've been trying to make sure that I'm framing it up in a way that the sort of the hill in the background is framed between these two walls of the ruin. I got my camera low enough that the one on the left is slightly over the line of the hill, so it doesn't kind of get lost against it. Now I'm basically just waiting for that light maybe to return and start to hit the hill, bring it out of its background a little bit more. It's starting to look quite nice. I'm really pleased with my final shot here. It's not a view I've seen from Skye. I'm pleased to have found something that's a bit more out of the ordinary, and I'm glad my patience in waiting for that light paid off. But the weather really persisted into the afternoon as I headed towards the famous Neist Point lighthouse. When I arrived, the cloud was low, the views were flat and lifeless, and frankly I felt a little bit uninspired. And then things got worse, with a hailstorm that blew in and nearly knocked me off my feet. So I went back to my car and I waited. Thankfully, the weather changes incredibly quickly in Scotland, and a bit of patience meant I was ready to take advantage as the light started to poke through the clouds again. As it did, it lit up the lighthouse and the cliffs, which now looked great against that dramatic sky in the background. The wind was still fierce though, so I struggled to film much, focusing more on trying to find more interesting compositions, going wide to use the rocks as foreground, as well as using a narrow panoramic aspect ratio to show more context in the scene. I'm really pleased with my images here, but I was cold, I was soaking wet, so I headed back to warm up with a beer. My final day started at 4 AM with a pre-sunrise hike through the darkness to photograph the island's most iconic landmark, the Old Man of Storr. The hike up was surprisingly tough, largely because of fierce wind and freezing temperatures, which meant I quickly found myself climbing through the snow. With Of course, from a photography perspective, I was super excited with this, and as I got to the viewpoint, I was thrilled to see the dusting of white over the landscape. But it was a while before sunrise, so I started out with some moody shots, leaning into the colder colour tones to match the conditions. And as the sun started to break through, the colours came alive, and I took my favourite image from the trip. I love the warmer tones here, the dusting of white on the background, and the mood that's still visible in the clouds above. I hung around for some time at the viewpoint, being quite honestly colder than I think I might have ever been, but the conditions didn't get better. In fact, that brief patch of light I had was quickly replaced by dense fog, blocking the view entirely and making my walk back down that bit more atmospheric. As I looked back, more blue sky and lovely light. Just goes to show how quickly the weather changes in these areas. I ended my day, and indeed the whole trip, by visiting the Kerrang, with its amazing views over the rocky hills. I discussed this at more length in another video, but I found the overhead light to be quite harsh here, and while I got a few shots in colour that I do like, I relied on my old Canon 6D, which I'd had converted to shoot infrared images. I love the black and white infrared shots I got here that turned that harsh, contrasty light into my advantage. It was a great scene to end my trip on and perfectly encapsulated what makes Skye so great. Dramatic beauty, unpredictable weather, and epic scenes around every corner. Skye deserves its reputation as a landscape photography haven, and I'm hoping this will be the first of many trips for me. But it's certainly the case that its huge Instagram popularity means that every inch has been photographed so much that it can also be quite difficult to find shots that you feel are truly your own and not just another version of what's already been done. And while I am really pleased with my own images that I've got, they're not unique in their composition or subject matter, but that shouldn't matter. They're mine, and I'm proud of what I've done here, and we should always try and take pride in our work for what it is, and not just in how it compares to others. Skye offered me some great opportunities, and maybe next time it'll offer me even better ones.